Hi, everyone. Welcome to Off Shelf Books. As you know, we love to explore faith-based books, but also part of exploring those faith-based books is exploring the faith behind it. And once again, I'm really thankful to be joined by Nathan and Tom again to help me explore these through the various topics. And also, we're going to dive into these in the realm of what culture says, apologetics, and theology. And do you feel like faith-based books are conforming to culture or defying culture? I think the publishing world has changed so much and culture has changed so much. And I was just wondering, like, your guys' thoughts on faith-based books. Do you think it's conforming to culture, or do you think it's defying culture?
Well, yeah, I think obviously there's there's kind of two camps. I wanted to more focus on the books that are conforming to culture.
Okay.
So I brought an example. So there's this book by Joyce Meyer called God Is Not Mad at You.
Oh, is that a recent one?
No, it's a few years old. But God Is Not Mad at You. I didn't read through the whole book or anything, but even just I think by the title alone, that just shows it's conforming to culture. Because, these days we live in a culture of no accountability. It's all about self, what truth you make for yourself. And God is, does get mad at people. I mean, well, it's not like a hate kind of mad, but it's just like God has righteous anger, right? He has grounds for being righteously angry.
Well, it's even like you say, it's nowhere in the Bible does it say that God will not either be mad at you or disappointed in you or anything like that. It's kind of like, if you look at the God of the Old Testament, he did some crazy things. I mean, come on, he had a whole people group wandering around a desert for 40 years because they didn't make him happy. I don't know. That's pretty crazy. If I piss someone off that much.
And I think we should give a biblical example just based on the title of that book to just show the contrast. And I pulled from 1 Kings 11 of chapter 11. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." I think just even the beginning of that verse, it very clearly says the Lord became angry with Solomon. It didn't say the Lord became angry with Solomon's sin. But
is there some context we're missing from Joyce Meyer? We look at this title, it's easy to just judge the message just based on a title, but is Joyce saying more than that? I mean, it is a bold title.
She is, but I just think, just based on the title of the book, that it just conveys such a level of inaccuracy that God does get angry with us.
Maybe, what if she said, God is never mad at you? What if she titled that?
I guess maybe that would be that would be a problem.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying. I mean, Joyce Meyer definitely walks a fine line with scripture. I mean, we don't have to go too far to go to even Joel Osteen. And
in the book, just so I have, because like I said, I have dabbled in the book. She tries to make the distinction that more God gets mad with our sin than mad with us as people. But like I said, that's already a false narrative to it, just based on the verse I read, coming right from the Bible, right? So she's got good intentions, and parts of her points are valid, but it's totally, I think it totally goes with our culture. Just, let's not offend anybody. Even just when, read it, God is not mad at you. It just conveys this thing, we serve a teddy bear God, and, we don't want to be offended.
So maybe the bigger question is, with now faith-based books, are there more authors similar to Joyce Meyer? Are we finding it more common?
Well, yeah, and Joel Osteen, like you mentioned.
Joel Osteen. He's been at it for a while. I think the challenge with Joel is, again, if we're just looking just surface level in the title, so many of the titles is using the word I or you, like I declare, and it's like the title alone, like it's making it about us.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if it's Joel Osteen or if it's another author, but the title of their book was Your Best Life Now.
That could have been Joel Osteen.
It might have been.
But no, Joel's been around for a while. Then would it be safe to say then faith-based books are continually to defy culture? I guess we would sure hope so. Like, what are your thoughts, Tom?
Well, I was kind of going off that point is like faith-based books. Well, it totally depends on the faith that they prescribe to, right? So there are very few times, and it can be argued that there has never been a time where the Bible isn't working against the culture in some way. Like, don't get me wrong, there are times where we have had societies and all this thing that are very biblically based. And you can even make the distinction that Western cultures are built on the Judeo-Christian framework, which is based in the Bible. So there are aspects of our culture that are very much based in the morality and everything like that in the Bible. But I would still say there are aspects of culture that do not conform with the Bible and how it lays things out. Now, can you say that's an interpretation thing, or is it a difference in culture because there are so many different things that we do now that we don't do then? Yes, that argument can be made. Is it necessarily a good argument? I don't know. So, to me, if you are writing a book that is a faith-based book and you are not writing it like... There was a book that I remember going to actually listen to the author speak on it. And it was how they had changed their lives to living by a biblical example, and they described in the book how they did that. That was a radical book at that time. It was crazy the response that had, because there were so many people, like it resonated with young people, I remember at the time, but I remember older people didn't necessarily like it because that was going against their lifestyle. Now, was what they were saying accurate in the book? In some cases, yes, because it was very much trying to mirror Christ and how Christ lived. Mm-hmm. And it was all about love and all this other things. And it's just like, I mean, the author even told us of how he got to meet Mother Teresa and kind of the situation or the things that he learned from her in even the short time that he was with her. And so there are things like that. So if you are writing a faith-based book and you're not receiving controversy on it, it makes me kind of wonder what's going on with that. I mean...
That means it's just full of fluff.
Well... But
it's just full of love.
See, there's one aspect of love that never gets discussed, and that's the rod and the staff. The staff is for guiding, the rod is for disciplining. You can love someone, but that also means you're calling out their faults.
So it's that tough love that's not often...
Yes.
Yeah, the tough love.
Yeah, in today's culture, it's like we talk about loving other people, accepting other people. It doesn't matter what they're doing, and there isn't that accountability. It's just kind of like people equate their lifestyle or what they believe or how they live their life. Like they want not just love from other people, but they want total acceptance for all their choices and no disagreement.
And it's just like...
Right, and that's no accountability.
Well, and
right?
I can look at that and be like, okay, yeah, I can love you. I can love you as a person. But if you're sinning right in front of me, well, if you don't prescribe to the same values that I do, all I can really do is say, I don't agree with that. If you do prescribe to the same values of that I do, Well, we have a way of discussing that. I can come to you and say, this is wrong. I don't agree with how you're doing this. I believe you are sinning doing this. You need to stop doing this. And because specifically as Christians, we are to be holy as Christ is holy. I mean, do I think I'm ever going to be there? No. Because we are called to be the perfect example that was given to us of what is expected of us.
I mean, you would hope the goal of faith-based books in some ways to have either an influence on culture or to help change culture. Maybe the greater question is that happening, or is culture changing the way faith-based books are being written now? Or are faith-based books still, are they influencing culture today? Is it making a difference? Or would culture, maybe it is, maybe it's the case that culture is maybe now having an influence on the publishing world?
Well, there's one thing that I've heard recently is the fact that people say that culture or that government is downstream from culture. And then I've heard the opposite is that culture is downstream from government. But where does culture start? Culture starts in the home, and that's not downstream from either. You know, culture starts in the home. Governance starts in the home. The home is the base building block of every part of our society. Do we have enough faith-based building blocks that are telling people, okay, this is what you're supposed to do on a personal level, but this is also how you're supposed to react with other people around you in a Christian way? And the newer stuff, like you said, it's I or you. And it's just like, no. Yeah. Your relationship with Christ is foremost. Your best life. What do you consider best? If you go by cultural values, well, that means success in business or success with money or whatnot. What does that mean when you're in a Christian standpoint? That means that you are devoting your life to spreading the gospel and to loving people. That has no room for capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, and not to harp too much on Joel. I guess it's just sometimes we really have to use discernment, because is he preaching about God? Yes. Is he talking about Jesus? Not so much. I don't really hear the name Jesus. I hear God a lot.
Just a little sprinkling of verses here and there.
Yeah, and actually sometimes, I know I'm only basing this off when I saw one of his sermons. A lot of it, he'll say the Bible says or Scripture says, but it's always a paraphrase. It's not really like he's not actually bringing up the verse.
He's not like, going and crack open on the Bible and go, hey, it's from this book and that verse and da-da-da-da-da.
And so it's weird. I think, when he's filling out stadiums for his sermons.
It's all feel good. And well, frankly, our faith, if you go by biblicals, there is no indication in the Bible that if we are following that we are going to have a good life, an easy life, a happy life. Nothing in there is going to say it's going to feel good. I mean, I'm sorry, when it says, take up your cross and follow me. What is the cross? A cross is something that people died on. A cross was painful and hard.
Yeah, your best life. No one thinks about what your best life actually could be. And Jesus, I don't believe, made any promise whatsoever. If anything, he promised it'd be a difficult life.
Yeah, he didn't promise the wife and 5 kids, 4-car garage, $200,000 a year, and vacations to Bahamas every year. That's not. It's not exactly what Jesus was preaching in his time, right? You know?
So is this a cause for concern?
No, it's a huge cause for concern, especially just on the whole, I think especially in the church today, it is about the feel good aspect, not being challenged on your faith, just confirming, hey, live a good lifestyle, be successful personally. And, I read a good quote somewhere that said, this whole feel-good culture of Christianity where you're not challenged, the quote just kind of went on to say, those people are worshiping a God, but it's not the God of the Bible.
Well, and it's just like, I have yet to see anywhere where in the Bible, where feelings are important. And it's just like, I'm reading the verses that it says are supposed to be attributed to that, and it's just like, no. It even says, faith comes before your feelings, because your feelings can lie to you, but your faith should be strong. So we are in such a society that, I feel this, or I feel this, and then everyone is supposed to react to how you feel. And it's just like, how you feel about something is going to be different depending on everyone's reaction to exactly what's going on. I mean, here's an easy solution. Find out 10 people and ask them, each time they got fired from a job, how did they feel? And I will probably guarantee you that each 10 people will have similar answers, and at least in some part, but will also have very different answers. And it will probably be also a very different answer each time they got fired, if they've been fired multiple times.
Well, this will be interesting now, because I think you're onto something. And then let's take it a step further, even in the realm of morality. I mean, culture has its own definition of morality. And so it got me wondering, and this has been an age-old debate, the whole, in terms of moral absolutes, can anything be objectively wrong in culture?
Well, I think we should define what it is.
Yeah.
Moral absolutes, I got a definition here. It says, moral absolutism is an ethical view that certain actions are absolutely right or wrong, regardless of other circumstances. I mean, I think just based on...
So can anything in this world be like 100% absolutely wrong?
I think so, just based on the aspect of even just, let's take our current justice system, right? I think most people in society, and I mean most as in probably 99%, would agree that things like murder, right? Murdering, killing someone is wrong. Stealing from people is wrong.
It depends on what society you're talking about, because there are societies where that isn't wrong.
Well, and maybe
I guess maybe I'm talking Western, where we live.
Well, and
right?
to maybe what Tom is getting to too, some people have objected, well, what about the man that steals a loaf of bread to feed his family? That I know that's a time-old analogy that's been used. Like, is stealing always wrong? Some would argue that's okay. Like,
is killing the guy that's killed multiple people wrong?
Well, and that's interesting, because there's a difference between killing and murder. Was there a motivation behind it? Because I would say it's okay to kill in self-defense, because murder is doing it under a motivation.
Well, it's a sinister motivation. Like someone, let's say you have someone that's driving along in the car, and they T-bone somebody, right? Mm-hmm. They get into an accident and they killed someone. There's no part of that situation that well, okay, probably most of the time, but most of the time that would be considering, well, it was an accident. This was something that was not foreseen. There was no premeditation. It just happened, right? Like someone died, right? So someone killed somebody else, but
yeah. Another example is you're asleep at night. Someone breaks into your house, trying to rob your house in the middle of the night. You have your gun. You shoot him dead. You killed him. Did you murder him?
That's tough.
What did you, with the murder, did you come with this knowledge, I want to annihilate this person, or was it under the motivation of, I need to defend myself? I would argue personally that you were killing that person, not have this malicious intent of wanting to end a person's life. Mm-hmm. So there is a distinct difference between killing and murder. But yeah, to what Tom was saying, yeah, that's a sketchy one.
Going back to your actual question, mm-hmm. Are there moral absolutes?
Can anything be objectively wrong?
And I would have to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't say yes, then the things that the Bible say are objectively wrong, we don't agree with. So if we are following what is laid out for us in the Bible, that this is wrong, that's wrong. Like if we accept the Bible as this, the sum total of God's letter to humans in how we are supposed to act, if it's our basic instruction before leaving Earth.
But the atheist will say to you, I don't need a God to tell me what's right or wrong.
Okay, what is the basis of your morality? Because you have one atheist that say that this is right, this is wrong. Well, it's like, hold on. You're going to have another one that says this is right and this is wrong. Like, even you get to the point where a simple statement, as simple as saying harming others, is wrong. We have how many situations that have come up today that it's like, okay, people have been harmed. We can all agree that that's not a good thing. Whose fault is it?
Well, if I'm going to put on my atheist cap, and I apologize to any of my atheist friends. I'll try and represent them well, but as an atheist, they would usually go to, well, culture, like society determines what's right and wrong. That would be a lot of their standard. That would usually the standard they would go to. Not all of them, but
I think that's moving to moral relativism in a way, though, or just relativism. Let's take the example. We're going back a bit here, but if that's indeed the case, if culture should define what is right and wrong, or what is a moral absolute right or wrong. Let's take Nazi Germany, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Nazi regime passed legal laws that legalized the genocide of the Jews, right? And the killing of their political opponents and imprisoning them. The Nazi culture, because it was a culture, fascism was a culture, that the elimination of your opponents was perfectly justified, right? So, and that was the culture. Like, okay, yeah, it was political, it was a government, but it was a regime, but it became a whole culture too, right? So in that case, it was acceptable. It was acceptable to eliminate your opponent's body, like just killing them, destroying them, putting them in camps. That was perfectly acceptable. So it's like, well, okay, well, if culture is defining it, so then that means it was fine because it was culture.
That begs the question for the atheist. The atheist will then say, well, they have to ask themselves, was what was done by the Nazis, was that objectively 100% wrong? Or was it just relatively wrong?
Part of the problem that comes with atheism is, so we have on paper, we have a recording of things that we consider morally wrong. And so we can either choose to follow that or not. There are countries out there that have pieces of paper that show, oh yeah, no, it's okay to kill your wife. Your wife is your property. So they have that piece of paper that says that is their belief system. Atheism has no set of values because that they can fall back on, because someone who grows up in our culture, well, they're influenced by the values that they see in our culture, whereas that culture where it's okay to see or kill your wife, well, then they're influenced by the values of that culture. So if you look at it from an atheistic standpoint, the only consistent thing that you can probably go to is the evolutionary or the animal kingdom, which then it depends on, well, how are we different from animals? But if you go by it, what is applicable in the animal kingdom is the strong survive. So from an atheist standpoint, how do they fight against something that might makes right? Well, yeah, but the people, you can look at all the issues that people have had in history where the strong people, the people in power, have just utterly decimated the people underneath them. So how can you say that that is right or that is wrong? Like, if you agree with might is right, okay, because that's something that you see in the animal kingdom that has no value, that has no effect from human society. So if there is no higher power, if there is no God, okay, well, we come from animals then. And if we come from animals, why are we so different from animals?
And that just means that morality is relative to the day and the culture that you're in. So, and if we're drawing from Darwinianism, the Nazis simply were fulfilling the strongest of the fittest. They were eliminating the weaker ones, what they deemed to be subhuman, right? So they were actually sort of fulfilling Darwinianism in a way.
Well, I guess the question then I would actually ask the atheist, can you actually live out your moral relativism? Because what if I physically abused your child? Will you just say that was absolutely wrong? Or would you just say, well, from my perspective, it was wrong, but from your perspective, it could have been okay? I think that's the question I always have for the atheists, and probably many Christians or with this morality. Like, you can say morality is relative, but can you actually truly live it out to its conclusion?
You can't. I don't think you can, because it would be total and utter chaos. If we just operate on the premise that morality is relative and that anything goes, someone could walk outside their house and be shot down and go, oh, okay, well, that's just, a couple neighbors fighting. Yeah. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's kind of fun. People are more Christian than they like to admit. Most people in society think that murder is wrong.
Well, maybe that's what you were trying to get with the example of Nazi Germany. I think maybe that's what you were getting at with that. Because
in that culture, it's acceptable to kill your opponents and throw them in prison. And
here's another example.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk to your atheists and you go to them and be like, okay, how can you say that slavery is wrong? Because depending on what culture you look at or what is going on, slavery has been around for, if not all, the majority of human life on this planet. And it's still actually very prevalent today, even though it is against the law in some countries. It is not against the law, and it is just common practice in other countries. I mean,
just the wording has changed. Now they just call it, instead of slavery, they call it human trafficking, right?
Well,
and that's the change. But this was just a piece I read a few weeks ago. Slavery, it's obviously illegal, but it's actually, there's more people enslaved today than any time in history.
Oh yeah,
and that's not something that's talked about.
Well, and there's a country that I currently heard of, and I want to be very careful how I say this, but from my understanding there, it is common practice to buy a female slave from a neighboring country so that they can be either the concubine or the wife or whatnot, but so that the men in the country can have a female companion. And I'm like, this is common practice. So how can an atheist in that situation say that is bad? Like, from our perspective, it's we've abolished slavery. Well, we've at least made it illegal. So from our perspective, it's wrong. From their perspective, it's wrong, or it's okay. So if you go over there and tell them that that's wrong, well, you're going to get either or one of two situations. Leave me alone. You don't know what you're talking about. This is good for me. Or, I can get mad at you, and then, well, the person, whoever is strongest then, is either right or gets the last word in, right? So it all depends.
I think, to add to your point, with the whole, you're going at it you're saying to the atheist, what standard do you have? We have a standard. You may not like our standard, but we actually have a standard. You don't have what is your standard? And I think that's what I loved about C.S. Lewis, who went from Christianity to being an atheist, but then reconverted back to Christianity. He made the simple statement, I see this crooked line, but how do I know it's crooked? I need to know what is a straight line. And the simple thing he's trying to make is there's got to be a standard of what makes a line even crooked to begin with. And it's so simple, yet it's so powerful.
Well, and a lot of people today would say, there's no God. Truth and morals and everything is how I define it in my life. So what works for me in my life is what goes. That's what a lot of people would say, right?
But if I come up, walk over and shoot you and kill you, what do you have to say then?
Well, I would say that's wrong.
As you're bleeding out.
Yeah, I'd be pretty pissed off. I'd be dying, but I'd be pissed off, right?
So could the atheist then say, well, you shot me. It wasn't objectively wrong. You're just...
No, maybe it wasn't murder. And, there's a little hole in my stomach that I'm bleeding out like liters, but,
You're just doing you. You're doing what you need to do.
Yeah, you're in my way. You're making it so that I can't live my life the way I want to live my life.
So moral relativism, it looks extremely attractive. But I think the challenge is, to its actual logical conclusion, there's some flaws.
It looks very attractive when the values of society are set a certain way. Because if you want to have moral relativism, I'm sorry, I still think that if you are starting to have wrong thoughts in some countries, and you're like, oh, from my morality, this shouldn't be a problem. Well, if the government tells you it's a problem, and they'll come and kill you if they find out that you're going against them, then moral relativism doesn't look attractive at all.
Yeah, it's only attractive when it seems to be convenient for us. When someone gets in your way.
Well, and I think that's why we have systems in place in this world just on their own propagate that there are moral absolutes. Like, someone, whatever. So going back to the thing of just say murder, whatever. So some serial killer guy, he's killed a few people, right? He goes to trial, right? He goes to trial. Goes before the jury. They hear all the evidence. He gets convicted, right? And he goes to prison for a very, very long time. I would say probably nobody in society questions that. Okay, that he's a serial killer. He killed a bunch of people, and he's gone to prison. We are generally all okay with that. Like, we don't really question, oh, yeah, he's a serial killer. Did he murder them, or just, did he not? Or like we, they do that in the trial, obviously, but the actual outcome, society itself doesn't really question that. We pretty much accept the ruling of the justice system.
Basically, so what it comes down for what you're saying is it comes down to the evidence. But I think there are certain things that we have certain rules in society, and I think that you can actually look at this from an objective standpoint. And if you look at it, depending on what value system you fall under, mm-hmm. or what belief system you fall under, there are certain things that keep popping up that time and again are proven to be things that we do not want in society. Because if you look at it from an objective standpoint, what are laws? Laws are things that we put in place to say that if we don't do these things, our society is more likely to function in a good and proper way. It is going to function in a way that will harm the least amount of people. And murdering other people seems to be up there. I mean, like, you can look at it. The 10 Commandments are very persuasive, or like they're all over the world in laws and all that stuff. Not necessarily the idolatry and stuff like that, but like, oh, do not murder. Try to stay loyal to your wife and, not step out on her. Now, different societies have different versions of that and stuff like that. But it's just like, there are certain things And I think one thing that actually is even a good comparison is any society that has really governed in, there seems to always be, you do not try and destroy the innocence of children.
Yeah, that's pretty sacred. And even with everything going on in our Western culture today, like the innocence of a child is still, still one of those sacred things, right?
I would say
less,
that's one of those things that throughout history, once we've reached a certain level, that a good way to make people mad in a society is to mess with children in that society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, then let's take this a step further. We'll go from moral absolutes now to like religious pluralism. It's quite the conundrum, because not only we've been talking about how everyone perceives morality differently, everyone has a worldview, and everyone puts their faith in something or someone. And it does beg the question in terms of religious pluralism, can it actually work? And just to be clear, like, I'll just give the definition. When it comes to religious pluralism, it is a belief in two or more religious worldviews as being equally valid or acceptable. But then, with that said, can that work?
No. I beg no.
I'm going to kind of go against you on that one.
I will go and say that I think intellectually in our heads it can work, but in our hearts I don't think so.
So I'm going to say this from our standpoint, in that you said no. From a Christian's perspective, there is no other version.
That's more what I'm speaking to.
We have been given, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. The only way through the Father is through me.
John 14:6.
So we, again, if we are following the Bible as the set of instructions for how we are supposed to live our life, it is very clearly told us that is how we achieve what for us is everlasting life, or eternal life through Christ, or the time our paradise, because heaven will be our paradise. So in that aspect, from Christianity, no, there are different value systems, different religions, that you have multiple different ways within that system to achieve paradise. So if you have multiple different ways in that system to achieve paradise, why should you not be able to combine it with other systems that might have similar ways of achieving paradise?
And I think we do need to be very clear so there's no miscommunication. In terms of religious pluralism, yes, we are simply talking about their religion and their faith. And yes, to what you're saying, I would also agree, like from a Christian worldview, that doesn't mean we're not accepting the person. That's to be clear. We're not accepting, it's the whole law of non-contradiction. You can't have A and not A at the same time. And so we can't accept what you consider your truth because there is only one truth. So it just is not compatible. We are completely accepting of the person, but yeah, it's more the religion and the faith that this is where pluralism, it struggles to achieve what it wants to do.
I would almost say, like in our society, in our world today, there's more of like a religious accommodation in a way. So like what I mean by that is
a woman.
Yeah. No, but you know what I mean? Like just we as Christians, according to the word, we believe that, Jesus makes claims to exclusivity, right? He really does. But we as believers, we acknowledge that there are other belief systems out there. We believe that we need to live in peace with those other systems, so people of other religions, but that doesn't necessarily mean we think they're valid. We accept them and we respect them for who they are as people, and we accept we all tolerate each other basically. But that doesn't necessarily mean you accept a different faith, right?
If my neighbor is a Buddhist, of course I'm going to accept him as a person. I think we're commanded to do that. There's no way around that. I guess it's the whole, we have a right to all of our ideas, but not all ideas are right. That's why I was maybe going on the perspective that I think in our heads it can make sense, but in our hearts, when you're really going down to the actual, to our heart of the discussion, when we're looking at our meaning, our morality, our origin, our destiny, which we all have to wrestle with these questions, there can only be one truth, at least from my point of view. Like, we can't both be right at the same time.
No, it's either one person's right and one person's wrong.
Well, and I think that's why maybe Christianity is definitely not attractive at all to a lot of people.
It's black and white in a lot of ways. Like, I'm not saying there isn't grays, but there's black and whites as to who Jesus said he was and who he claimed to be. It's either, our faith system is either everything that Christ ever said it was, or it's not. It's either Jesus was legit and everything he said and did was correct and right, and we should believe and follow it, or he was crazy. Like, this really, there really is no gray with him.
It's so hard to do that with that whole tough love. It's hard to do it in love in that regard. Like, to actually say, sorry, your God is not the one true God. That's offensive. Like, try saying that to a Muslim.
Yeah, and I think also the important thing to recognize with, talking about religious pluralism and just our views of other people, there's a lot of people of other belief systems that they are genuinely trying to connect with God. Like, they believe there is a God, right? And I guess I'm probably speaking more to our Islam and Judaism, because there's a lot of disagreements, obviously.
Yeah. But
the one thing we can all agree on is that there is one God. We all of those three systems believe there is one God. That is one area of commonality. And there's people, like I said, there's Muslims out there, there's Jewish people out there that they are genuine people. They want to connect.
Another thing they can
God,
agree about,
right?
Is that they all agree that Jesus existed.
Oh yeah. That's not a question. It's just the interpretation of what Jesus was.
To them, it depends on how you live your life. Like, in Christianity, how we live our life doesn't determine whether or not we get into heaven.
It counts as a faucet of faith, as you could say. Like, you live the life that Jesus laid out for us to live, right? That part is still important as the fruit of your faith, but it's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not the only bar.
Yeah,
right?
No, it's like there's a misconception out there that I think that you can get into heaven by, specifically the Christian heaven, by doing good deeds and by doing that, and it's just like, from my perspective, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. Okay. I have to go through him. I have to make that choice. Now, there is so much different talking points or different versions of people going through this and what it all means and all that stuff. And so I'm not knowledgeable enough on that stuff. But there are belief systems that have nothing to do with Christianity, where how you live your life is going to determine on whether or not you go to paradise.
You even just take that from Islam, right?
Yeah. And
the 5 pillars.
And if you live your life according to these conceptions, okay, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. Well, and I don't know, I'm just going to use these as 2 examples. If Buddhism tells you to live your life this way and Islam tells you to live your life this way, it's like, well, wait a minute, those 2 are both telling me to live my life a certain way, and they are both very common. I don't actually know if there's actually any overlap. This is just an example, but it's just like, well, if both of them are telling me to do this, why can't I believe in both of them?
I think we're already living out this experiment of pluralism, whether we like it or not.
People want to do what they want to do because it makes them feel good.
Well, and absolutely. It goes to the whole, what we were talking about earlier with morality. We're in this place where I think people, they don't want God. or any one standard of God, but they actually, if anything, they want to be their own God. They want to define what is truth. They want to define what's moral.
Well, they 100% do. And what's so funny is sometimes you'll hear people like, well, like I live my own truth and I live the way that I want to live. And that but then on the other hand, you'll hear a lot of those same people saying, well, I want to get into heaven. Right. That's what you'll hear though. It's kind of it's an interesting, I guess you could say, contradiction. It's like, I'm going to live life my way, but I still want to get into heaven.
The pluralist gives a great example of the whole mountain. It's like, it doesn't matter which path you take. There's multiple ways to get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah. And I would just say, based on the exclusivity of Jesus and the claims he made, there is only one way. Because Jesus claims to be exclusive, and he is exclusive in everything that he did. So there is only one way.
So then those paths on the mountain,
they lead to a dead end. They all lead to off the cliff.
Well,
because you're rolling right off the cliff there. You're got down that gorge, man.
I hope they at least look down the cliff.
Yeah, it's just that Jesus makes exclusive claims. Christianity makes exclusive claims that exist in no other system, and that's the basis alone why I think religious pluralism can't work.
Well, I was going to say, if you get to the top of the mountain and there's a set of gates there, and they only allow certain people to go through the gates, doesn't necessarily matter how you get to the top of the mountain. It depends on whether or not you can go through the gates.
Well, I think they mean the summit actually is heaven. I think that's the example they were going with.
Well, and I think this is something that people don't necessarily even really think of. We're all going to heaven. All of us. Because we're going to go and all of us are going to be in the judgment room. Yeah, you can take whichever way you want to get there, but guess what? There's a guy that's sitting there, and he has a book, and if your name isn't in that book,
you're going down. You're going
not
downtown.
Staying there.
See, I always thought Hades, though, was that place before you actually is the place of judgment. I could be wrong, but I always thought Hades was that last step.
See,
before
Hades is after the sentence has already been carried out. Like, that's your prison.
Hades is you're starting to think of like purgatory.
Yeah. So the judgment's happened, then that particular person.
Hell is the result of your choices.
Right.
Like, hell is the result of that someone did not have faith in God and did not follow him in their life, and did not accept him as their savior, right? That's where they're going.
That makes hell even worse, because for a brief moment, as to what you're saying, Tom, like if we do, all of us in fact do go to heaven, you get this glimpse, a possible glimpse of what heaven could be like, but then some people won't get it.
It's not going to be like the South Park episode. Not everyone's going to die and wake up and be like, oh, we're in hell?
For those of you who were a little confused, you are dead, and this is hell.
Oh, who got it right? It's like, you're going to be like, oh no, it's...
Well, who was right? Who gets into heaven?
I'm afraid it was the Mormons.
We are all going to get judged. Mm-hmm. And people don't like the fact that they're going to be judged.
I was a practicing Jehovah's Witness. You picked the wrong religion as well.
Well, no, they hate the idea. But yet they want heaven.
I thought we went to heaven.
Yes, well, I'm afraid you were wrong.
And then, I heard a good quote. Heard a good quote somewhere. It said, if you didn't want to spend any time with God on this earth, why would you want to spend eternity with him? If you wanted nothing to do with God while you're on earth, why would you want anything to do with him in eternity? Yeah. You obviously chose you didn't want his company.
That adds to the whole free will argument too, because some people think you don't have free will. That's the beauty of it. God's not going to force you into heaven. He won't.
No, he won't.
God wants you to be in heaven.
Mm-hmm. He wants us, but he's not going to go.
He's not going to force us in.
That's
not love anymore. That's not love at all.
This is the whole issue of like the predestination and all this other stuff. And I think part of the whole issue that we go through is that if we actually believe that he is the Alpha and the Omega, then we actually have to believe that time does not affect God.
God's outside of time.
Yeah, so if God is outside of the time, it doesn't matter what we've done or what we're doing. God already knows the final results.
God's in charge of Big Ben.
And but it's the whole thing, and so it's like, oh, do we have free will or do we not have free will? And it's just like it comes right down to it. God says we have free will. So if God says we have free will and we believe in him, then we have free will.
And well, then the pluralists they would have probably their last argument towards it would be like, I didn't know about this path, this one way. I never heard about it. I didn't know that. And what do you say to that? I think in this age of internet, I mean, it's getting harder and harder
I don't think the Bible speaks exactly to, like, you know, because there are people in the world, and there were lots of billions of people before even Jesus came along. Like, they never knew the God of Israel. They never knew Jesus. And there's people that are born today, right now, that go through a whole life. There are people that will never hear of Jesus. That is fact. It's probably, I can't speculate as to how many people would or would not know. But I think people that never heard about him or never had the opportunity, or just, you know, there was never anything, and they die. You know, I have to believe that Jesus has a system of justice and judgment for those people.
In this age of internet now, it's becoming like, as it spreads out and more accessible to the world, it's getting harder and harder to make that claim. I never heard about this.
But there will still be people that genuinely never heard about Jesus.
But it's getting harder.
So there's a couple points here. If your neighbor claims that he has never heard of Jesus,
mm-hmm.
that's your responsibility. That is a shortcoming that you have done.
Absolutely.
So that is actually something that is going to be applied to us on Judgment Day as well. And people don't necessarily even think about that, is that if we are not out there, if we are not trying to do something to fulfill the Great Commission, we will be judged for that, because that is what we are called to do.
The Great Commission.
Yeah. So there are those that have never heard of it, or there are those that have heard about it and they say they don't want anything to do with it. Now, that's a different thing. Now, yes, there are different cultures and all this other thing, like pre-colonization. The North American continent had no way of knowing Christianity.
Or Jesus, yeah.
And yet, I heard this recently, and I am very intrigued by it, and I want to do some research on it, in that I heard that there is a North American tribe that if you actually look at if you look into their history and into their traditions, there are certain things that are markedly similar to things in Judaism. For instance, their creation myth. Their creation myth, over 6 days, it was a voice speaking out over the water. How similar is that to, you know, ours in the Bible?
Well, God breathed through he talked to a cloud and fire and burning bushes, and, you know.
Like, there's even this, they even say that one of the words for father in that language is Abba.
Well, yeah, and then I guess where I'm going with the whole internet, maybe I never told my neighbor directly, but I think more and more we are actually fulfilling the Great Commission, maybe in a digital realm, but to think that if I really want to ask what's the purpose of my life, I could do a Google search, and some Christian out there has actually posted what is the purpose. And in some ways, the Great Commission is being fulfilled. Now, granted, the whole privacy restrictions of certain countries, yes, that's where it probably adds to your point. Still, there's that chance not every country is going to get that access. And yeah, they may not hear about it.
Like even the Hermit Kingdom, think about North Korea.
Yeah.
There is no internet there.
Yeah.
Like just like they keep information, like in dictatorships would be one example where people wouldn't necessarily hear about them, because
but I like where Tom is going with that point. It's like sometimes that is an option, but what about your next door neighbor? Like, you can to this day you can knock on their door and say, hey, you want to come over?
our Christianity has been and always will be about community.
Mm-hmm.
If we are not out there building community, and how do you have community? Because guess what? Online community, yeah, we can say it's great, but we are biologically social creatures. We need to be in groups with other people or our health is affected.
But what about those Zoom meetings and Skype conferences? I can see, I can see your face.
They do not do the same thing. Okay, let's put it this way. I have had times where I do not see people for an extended period of time in face to face. And yet I have seen people over the internet or talk to people. No. There is so much more going on by having groups of people together in the same space where they can interact with each other. That is very important.
You're talking, the physical interaction, because I was going to say, boy, not too long ago, the three of us were playing video games together all remotely.
It wasn't necessarily our first choice, though.
No.
Well, let's
absolutely, yeah. But we made it happen.
We don't even have to touch each other. There is a difference in whether or not we are playing video games over online with each other, or if we have our computers in the same room and we're playing them there.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the difference physically in how we interact. Like, it would be like, if this is something I've observed, but if you were to video each of us and compare the reactions of when we are playing online with people versus when we are playing in the same room with people, we're doing the exact same activity. The difference is where we are.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. We could all have webcams, game remotely. We could all be together remotely, and we can see each other's faces and reaction. But yes, you're saying, there is still a difference when you're physically together in a room. The reaction actually will be different.
Although they're saying in tech, they're saying now the replacement for in-person gatherings is we're going to go crazy on VR. I was reading the other day, it said, technology of the future, we could all be here in the living room. I could be here in my living room and you guys will just be holograms sitting in chairs next to me. And that's still, and there's like, that brings in real human interaction. It's like, no, there's still a hologram in a chair.
I can get on board with that because not that particularly, but I can get on board with, my reaction to people online was technically different. Like it was still the same friend in person, but there just seemed to be something different about not seeing them physically. Like we're sitting in this room together. I think we notice a difference than if we were just to talk remotely.
Well, and even just in everyday communication with each other, we'll all text each other a little bit, right? Hey, are you coming? You want to go do this, whatever. But there's a huge difference between that and even just picking up the phone and making a phone call. Like just the fact that you're communicating voice to voice.
Like it is biblical for us as members of the church to get together and meet. Because it doesn't say, you can talk to people. No, it is when 3 or more are gathered in my name.
It just doesn't say where and how.
I don't know if it's supposed to be in the living room or not today, but
gathered means that they are in the same location.
Yeah, I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
We didn't pull out a chair for. I guess he's sitting there. Jesus is sitting over there, but didn't pull out the chair.
Here's the comfy chair, don't you know?
Yeah, he gets a good one.
Yeah, see, and that's one of the things is like, so there's the whole example. Jesus was the one washing the disciples' feet. But he still went and sat at the head of the table, and the head of the table is typically where the best chair was.
Yeah, to kind of jump on from Tom's point about the whole Great Commission, how then we all work. We spend probably a third of our lives working or around that time. That's a huge opportunity for Christians to live out the Great Commission at their workplace.
We spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our own families.
They're like your second family. It's your family away from your family. And so I think I've wrestled with this personally. Maybe you both have too. Like what does it practically mean to live out our faith in the workplace? Especially in this this day and age. And
I mean, I think I think for me personally, like how I approach that is, number one is through relationship building. Forming a friendship with a coworker, or you're just looking for those opportunities to talk to them. But I also, sometimes you can do a random act of kindness, and maybe that can be an opportunity for you to talk to them further. Like, I've, bought coffees, or gone to Second Cup and bought everyone in the front office, like a beverage, just random, and,
that's a great idea.
And doing things and just, I just walk around and ask people, hey, what do you want? And I go and get it. And that's just a simple, very random act of kindness with no expectation of anything in return. And you hope that, maybe you've planted a seed somewhere for a conversation.
It's a small investment, and it actually, it's amazing how just buying a cup of coffee.
I think is worth someone's soul,
Yeah.
I think so. You're going to put a dollar value on it. But,
yeah. Well, it depends. Starbucks or Tim's.
Or McDonald's too. I mean, it depends on your budget, right? I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Might would entice them with the more expensive stuff, but
yeah. And you may want to give them the best, give them the absolute best.
100%, yeah.
I think Starbucks, in my opinion, like, I don't buy it often, but it's more of like a treat to me because it feels like the Rolls Royce of.
100% is, and it gives you that extra boost. So I would say stick with the Starbucks. I'm going to do the random act of kindness with the coffee, but anyway.
I kind of agree that, but one thing that I think we can really actually look at is, how did Christ interact with people? Because Christ, never necessarily do we see him in a position where he is in with a worker or a coworker or someone, right? Like he is always the one going around teaching.
And he also looked for the people that, like, his first magnet was always the downtrodden, was the people that were suffering, right? Like with a disease, or with a demon, or with there's so many countless examples. Jesus, he heads straight for the people that everyone else in society wants to shun, like, come on, the tax collector.
Oh yeah, no, and
Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus was one of them.
He's one of the tax collectors. I think probably dealt with more than that.
I guess he was a short little man. He had to get up on the tree.
He was sitting in a tree, and then probably gone on someone's shoulders and with his house. But
it's you look at it, but there's two kind of interactions in which you can kind of look at this is Christ's interaction with the disciples, and it was because. That is probably a very good example, because these are people that he saw day in, day out, every day. They saw him through everything that happened. They saw him at the highs. They saw him at the lows. And
I mean, they couldn't even stay awake when he told them to stay awake while they're praying. I mean, come on,
But it was just,
where's the discipline here?
And in that case, how did he discipline them? Or was it through grace? Like, he reprimanded them, and then he's like, okay, now stay up. And then he goes back and does it. And then nothing else really happens with them, right? Because, they do fall asleep again. But it's grace and living your life as though, or this is the whole thing, living your life as if you're Christ. So if people can see the love of Christ in you, and they will want to see that. If they see the joy of Christ in your life, they're going to ask you about it. So, again, we are so used to happiness and happiness and happiness. And what do you strive for in work? It's, happiness, but you also strive for success and all those other things. And it's just like, we are called at work to live every day like we are working for Christ. I don't do that. I am horrible at that.
Yeah, you can get better at it. You can get better at it.
But that is what I am called to do.
Well, and
it looks like you're going for a Starbucks run tomorrow.
Hope his staff isn't like a staff of like.
Ooh,
his department's not like 15 people.
I don't know. It might be one expensive bill, but it'll be worthwhile.
Yeah. Okay. Do I have to do the guys in the back too?
Yeah, you do.
Because-
Sure, you do.
You got to reach the ends of the earth.
Come on, man.
Dude.
Yeah, ends of the earth means ends of the end of the warehouse, right? End of the office property now.
Oh, man.
Oh man.
This could be expensive
You
to build
realize,
more.
like, that's just about like 100 coffees, right?
That's okay. You can afford it. You're doing good.
Just put it on the card.
Yeah, on the credit card.
How much
too.
money do you think I got make? I don't have that kind of money.
Oh, come on.
I am blessed. I am not that blessed.
The beauty is they'll ask you that question, where are you getting this money from? And you'll gladly share the good news.
I don't know.
You could say
That'll
you
be
got
my
it.
answers. I don't know where I'm
You
getting
could
this
just say
money.
you got it from your Bitcoin miner, but it's crypto. So. But,
Oh, no, I can't say that because then I would be lying. So don't tell me to lie.
Jesus may be flipping tables.
yeah,
All this trading going on.
too much trading. Yeah, Bitcoin's the top.
money
of that,
money
so.
changers,
Yeah, and money changers, just the grubby hands.
But
Let's
like,
get into it.
so this is an example that I have from work. Is there? I am. So the office I work in is kind of very unique in certain aspects, or at least I find it unique because I've never worked in an office like this. But basically, I think there are at least 4 or 5 different value systems that I know of represented within the office that I work. And so there are conversations where I come up and I go, okay, I know that this is what you believe in. I know the name of it. I don't know anything else about it. Please tell me about it.
Well, and I think we're getting into this stage now, just with today's climate. It's a great thing Jesus modeled faith in action, because now with workplaces, it's getting harder and harder to share verbally your faith. And so maybe not all, but definitely it's some people are just not in a position to. You want to, but you really actually can't. You will get in trouble or get fired, or like worst case scenario. But this is where I think it's a beautiful avenue where if you can't share it verbally, what an opportunity to do it by action, where your actions can, and that adds to your point, even just buying the coffees, like you're speaking a language where maybe on the surface it's just coffee, but they look at that and it's like, wait a second, this isn't right. I have the strong conviction that as Christians, we ought to be the hardest workers in the workplace, not in the sense of being a workaholic, but working hard in such a way where I firmly believe this. Our coworkers are watching us, whether we believe it or not. They are looking at us and what we say, what we do. And if we're the hardest workers in the workplace, they will see and they will take it notice and they will wonder and they will ask. And if that means it's a conversation outside the workplace, fantastic. But I'm thankful that if it's not verbal, we do have the other option of action.
I can tell you this, the person who works the front desk at where I work knows exactly who is willing to stay and do overtime and who is not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's not from talking to them. That's from watching them day after day of when they leave the office.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I kind of agree with you. Being hardworking and I frequently am working an hour past when I get paid. That's just the demands of my job, right? But I don't look for recognition for that. I don't look for. It's just part of the job. It's what I got to do. I got to work hard. Got to be there.
Well, and I was always told too, like we ought to work that whoever your superior is, your boss is, work in a way that it's as if you're working for Jesus. Even if you're mopping a floor, if your job is to mop this floor, if you knew that Jesus was going to walk on this floor, you would mop it in a way where it's like you want to do the absolute best. And I know it's not the best analogy, but it's like I think it's the mindset of, not for public recognition, but it's our motivation behind it.
And every job is important. One of my former bosses once told me just a great piece of advice. She was just like, Nathan, never let anyone tell you that what you do for work isn't good enough. And that has always stuck with me. So they equal in importance. There's no.
let's put it this way. There are some jobs that are very much despised or looked down upon because people look at that and they say, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's put it this way. One of those jobs is sanitation, and one of the parts of that is the people in sanitation make sure that the water that comes out of the tap is clean and healthy for you to drink. If they're not doing their job properly, guess what? There's one group of people who can take out cities at a time if they start messing things up.
And that's right. That's why every job is important. Imagine if tomorrow in all of our offices, imagine if all of our custodial staff all quit. So garbages aren't being cleaned. Carpets aren't being vacuumed. Nothing's being cleaned. Nothing's being done. I think you'd have a lot of irritated people. Maybe not right away, not that day, but within a few days, if they all had to do it. Ooh.
Dude, I have some people that are very strict about how they, or what standards they have for the custodial people. They would notice right away.
They'd notice real fast if everyone just went on strike.
I think of that Simpsons episode where Homer was, oh, don't worry.
The garbage man can.
The garbage man can do it, and it was like the cleanest of everything. But then the budget was completely out of whack.
Simpson, you idiot! You spent your entire year's budget in a month.
Like he overspent, and so if we didn't pay our garbage men,
that'd be a problem.
we notice a difference really fast.
That would
how
pile up
important.
real fast.
Oh boy!
That stink. That stink would yep. They'd be ringing off the hook there.
There are how many plagues associated with the fact that people live together and they didn't take out their garbage properly?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I think this just shows how broken our world is. That we've placed the importance of people's jobs based on their title, their job description, their salary, and it just shows all the more how in the kingdom, I don't know if we will have jobs. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But
I think we're going to be kept busy.
I think if the attorney's a long time.
That's not retirement, you know.
Yeah, attorneys a pretty long time. So I mean, to think that if there was such a thing as custodians in heaven, it wouldn't make a difference what title you have.
Isn't that what the angels are?
Those talk about guys that work overtime. The angels have got it in. You know, I'm sure their time sheets are just like. I don't even want to know how long they are.
Well, they don't need to sleep, right?
No, they don't. But they still,
Tom, for you, like at your workplace, have you thought about what kind of practicality can be involved living out your faith in the workplace? Do you have any examples to share for the time you've been at work?
Well, see, with that, in the way that my workspace is kind of designated out is actually, so we have multiple levels in our office, and I'm actually on the ground floor just because of the nature of my job, not because I have a fancy position. But everyone that's kind of on that ground floor with me knows my belief system, at least. And so now, in some ways, I have it easy because there are multiple people with that belief system that I work with. So interacting like that and stuff like that, in some ways, I think it's almost made it too easy for me. But it's also been really nice because there are times where I've struggled with certain things, and there are people at work that I can lean on, be like, hey, like this is what I'm going through, like through life's issues, and they are very accommodating through that. But it's also like there are times where, like I was helping a coworker out, and it was just a very interesting situation how it turned out to be, because I was helping them move something with my truck, and I didn't necessarily expect it at the time, but they were actually riding in my truck with me at the time. I had a very interesting conversation with them because I was like, okay, so they are an immigrant. And I was like, okay, so what is your religion? And it was, well, it's this. And then I'm like, okay, how can you explain your religion to me? That was a very interesting conversation because he had a very hard time explaining his religion to me. And there's another guy that...
Did he say what is... what is he?
Well, he did explain what it was and kind of how he or what he believed in the religion. It's one of those religions that there are multiple different things that you can believe in. But it's even like one of the guys I work with is a non-practicing Muslim. And I was like, what do you mean you're a non-practicing Muslim? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
You're either practicing or not. I never understood that.
Well, they might observe that. Well, I think what they might mean by that, I'm just speculating, but they might mean that they observe they might observe the important.
Well, no, it means that they grew up in the Middle East and then they immigrated here.
Yeah. Well,
so they don't necessarily fully believe in everything, but
they might follow the traditions of their family.
Well,
right?
It's because it was so seeped in the culture.
Yeah.
It's like, like a good comparison is the difference between Judaism and Jewish culture. And it's like, in some cases, you can't separate that out. Like Jewish culture is the same as Judaism. And so people who practice Jewish culture might not believe in Judaism or might not follow Judaism, but because they're following their Jewish culture, they do the same things. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that progression in that, because it's just like, I'm not trying to be like, I think you're wrong. I think what you believe is wrong. It's like, yeah, I do think what they believe is wrong, but it's just like, how am I going to show them that I am interested in them as a person and that I care more about them as a person than what they believe in?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, what you're doing is wrong. Okay, fine. Like, I'm sorry, if I approached everyone who I knew and be like, this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this, I wouldn't be talking to people, because people are like, no, you're just not friendly and you're not a nice person and I don't want to spend time with you.
I would say it's such simple advice, yet I found it to be quite profound, at least in my workplace. And I think this can translate to any workplace, to be honest, but it's so simple. It's to just practically live out your faith in a small way. Just get to know them. And I think, and you kind of touched on that too with your coworker. You got to know him. You were asking about what his religion was, what he believes in. Like, that's getting to know. And I think it's so simple. Yeah, people love to talk about themselves. Maybe not everyone, but more often than not, people love to talk about themselves. I don't mean that in an arrogant, prideful way, but I think there's something about just, human interaction when you're...
The less talking you're doing, the better.
Well, and they can tell there's a sense that you genuinely care about them. And if the second greatest commandment is to, love your neighbor as yourself, whoever you're interacting with, those are your neighbors. Maybe not physically right beside you, but they're your neighbors, and part of loving them is getting to know them, and and the more you do that, it actually builds trust. So then you can actually have deeper conversations.
Yeah, and I think too, just to kind of bounce off what you're saying a little bit, when you get to know people in your workplace, your coworkers become friends, and you find out they're going through a hard time, or someone's dying in their family from cancer, or like whatever. It's interesting how, just from my experience, how open people have been when I've just said, well, I will pray for you and your family. Like when, like you say, I'm going to pray for you. People do acknowledge that as an act of love, and they appreciate that. They might not necessarily believe in God, or they might not necessarily believe in what we believe, but there is an acknowledgement there that they acknowledge that you are trying to love them. You're trying to care for them, right? That I think, it's just kind of interesting.
Interesting when you hear certain people be like, because that's one way. Like if you are someone who has a hard time talking to people, and it's funny because, like, to me, I'm like, once you say it out loud, it's like, it seems kind of obvious, but there are certain things that people respond to. People respond to openness and direct. So if if you can try and show people that you're not trying to change who they are or anything, like you generally are just there and present in the moment, people who you can say hi to people, a lot of people will say hi back unless something crazy is going on. But if you really want to start a conversation with people, one of the best two ways is asking them a question. It can be a very general question, typically more of a question on, what they're doing or whatnot, or complimenting them. You want to start a conversation with anybody? Try doing those two things.
Yeah, I mean, and I just love the established, and like you said, like there's an established trust, but yeah, even when it's someone that actually doesn't believe what you believe, it's just the fact that you got to know them, and like you were saying, like I'm not thinking any less of you. I'm not saying I disagree with your beliefs. I mean, inherently I guess inherently we do, but the fact that you're not even bringing up any of those topics, you're just generally getting to know them, and they're like, oh wow, even though I believe this, it's not what he believes, but he's still willing to just hang out with me, talk with me. And I know it's kind of challenging, because I know some people would say in the workplace, you got to keep the work and your personal lives separate. Like there's some people say there's no such thing as friendships with your coworkers. I think the Christian worldview would disagree with that.
Or it's called no friendship with your boss, right?
Yeah, I think
right?
maybe
Or
that's
no friendship with your boss.
Yeah.
I have a coworker that I have known, or I started working with them before they got married. So because of that, if you look at it on how much time he has actually spent with working with me versus time spent with his wife, he has spent more time with me than he has with his wife. And like he got married like shortly after we started working together. So it's pretty close.
It says something.
But it's just like you look at that, and like there are statistics that you can choose it, but I'm assuming that he sleeps like 2 hours or 8 hours a night. You are in all these opportunities that are all around us, and we are constantly under scrutiny. Well, what if I'm like a random person in the middle of the street? Like no one's going to be paying attention to me. Yeah, some people are. And people will remember you. So yeah, there has to be grace there on when you have times where you're not doing your best, when you're acting out. But it's also, you are called to live a grace-filled, love-filled life.
Being consistent.
And being consistent.
Being
is
godly
the
consistent.
hardest thing out there.
So let's say you strike up that conversation with, whether it be a coworker or your neighbor. You actually do get to discuss, you get to talk about your faith, and they get to talk about theirs, and they don't believe what you believe in. And they ask you, well, what is the greatest evidence that you have that you believe God exists? I guess we would assume that this person would be an atheist or even agnostic. But what would be that greatest? Tell me, what's your greatest evidence that you even believe in a God, that a God exists, let alone which God? But yeah, what would you say to them? What would be your greatest piece of evidence?
Well, I wouldn't say it's just one piece. It's probably several.
Yeah, but they want your greatest, your best shot. I know there's quite a few pieces, but if you had,
well, if we're getting, and especially these days, people like to go scientific. So I would say, well, I guess you could say scientific or physics, or I would just say on the basis of the Big Bang alone, that it proves God's existence, because, the Big Bang Theory
All started with a big bang.
It talks about how there's an explosion, and that's how, the universe came about. But something doesn't come from nothing, right? Something caused the uncaused cause, basically. There had to have been divine intervention for the universe to come into being, because you can't create something out of nothing. Like, that doesn't happen. Like,
so yeah, because you're saying, like, we can just look around, we see lights, we see cameras, we see this table, these chairs, like there was a creator, there was a designer.
And because if we're talking about the formation of the universe, there would have been, there was no world, there was no mankind, there was nothing. Jesus, in the Bible it says that God was there before the foundation of the world. He was the hand that caused the universe to be brought into being. There is no other explanation. You can't create something out of nothing. My phone wasn't created out of nothing. It didn't just poof appear.
The pieces just didn't all connect.
Yeah, it didn't just come together like that. That's my first piece would be that, but the other piece would be order and design. This world, it's in a fallen state, but everything that God created was meant for perfection. I mean, everything in our world flows in symmetry. Mother Nature flows in symmetry. We have 4 seasons. We have the perfect balance of oxygen to nitrogen and hydrogen in our atmosphere so that we don't all choke and die. An apple grows on a tree. An apple falls to the ground 100 times out of 100. The apple doesn't go up or sideways or 5,000 miles to the east and blows through a wall.
And tornadoes do happen.
Yeah, they do.
That would be cool though if an apple put a hole in the wall and falling off a tree.
And I'm not gonna speculate because we haven't gone that far. But as far as I'm aware, there is no other planet in the universe like ours that sustains life like ours. Everything in our world, just take Mother Nature alone. Mother Nature takes care of itself. Like the systems in the world, our air pressure systems, moisture, our seasons, our heating and cooling, and our atmosphere being protected from solar radiation from the sun that would burn us up like meatballs if the ozone layer just went to pot. We started to make it go to pot in the 70s with that aerosol crap above Antarctica. I forget what the name of the chemical is, but we actually punched a hole in the ozone layer. That was us, right? So those would be 2 scientific examples. My other one would obviously be the gospel, would be the 4 gospels, because it's eyewitness account testimony as to the life and times of Christ, who is God. Those would kind of be my big 3.
Tom, what would be your greatest, if you only had one piece, I know there can be multiple, but what would be, if you had one piece of evidence, what would be your greatest piece of evidence that you could share with someone that this points to that God does exist?
I don't really have one.
Okay.
I will say something that I have told to people, though, is so you have 2 options in front of you. God exists or God doesn't exist. Okay, so what are you going to do? Well, if you believe that God doesn't exist and God doesn't exist, nothing happens. If you believe that God does exist and God doesn't exist, nothing happens. If you believe that God does exist and that God does exist, well, assuming you are believing in what the actual God wants, you're fine. If you believe that God doesn't exist and God does exist, well, then you're in trouble. So to me, if you look at it, it's just like, if there is no God, then what I believe in my value system doesn't matter. But my value system is telling me, or in that case, what my value is telling me is it is a value system that has been developed over a certain length of time that tells me how I am supposed to live my life in such a way that I can live with other people and do so very well, like it would be harmonious. Because if God doesn't exist, then all religion is trying to do is trying to get us to live in a way that we can get along with each other. But if you actually want like a scientific version of, well, does God exist or not,
doesn't even have to be scientific.
Well, is a question. is through all the different, animals in the world and all the other different things, why are humans the only ones that have done what they have done? Why? Because we know that dolphins, very smart animals. Chimps aren't necessarily dumb animals. There are so many different animals out there that if we actually look at their potential for intelligence, because that's one thing that some people say, oh, it's just our intelligence. Well, it's if you look at it, dolphins can be considered on average smarter than humans, so that doesn't work. But it's just you look at it, it's just why, either how is it that humans are the only species that is intelligent, or, I don't know. I kind of lose it there, but it's just the fact that humans are kind of the sole ones that are intelligent. Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, you'd think that there'd be more animals that would be trying to get to where we are because we've kind of taken over the world. So you'd want more animals to get there. So does that mean we've killed them all off? Or just, are we unique in some way? And if we are unique in some way, that there's nothing in nature that makes it seem like that should be possible.
Well, it's interesting because you say you don't really have any evidence, but kind of indirectly you gave evidence. I think you're kind of going with a mash of intelligent design and a little bit of the moral argument a little bit with both. You kind of indirectly did give some evidence.
He gave an answer.
Yeah.
I have a quote I want to read, and
sure.
feel free to give feedback on it. Not entirely related to what Tom is saying, but I've always really loved this one. It's by Blaise Pascal, and he says, "Belief is a wise wager. Granted that faith cannot be proved, what harm will it come to you if you gamble on its truth and it proves false? If you gain all. If you lose nothing. Wager then, without hesitation, that he exists."
Yeah, and that was a little bit what Tom was referring to.
But it's kind of the truth. I mean, if let's say Jesus is not God, and Jesus is just indeed was a human teacher, and I spent my life following his tenets and believing him and living an amazing life on this earth, contributing to loving my neighbor and making a difference in the world. That is not a waste of my life. If there is no God and I die, that is not a waste of my life.
Yeah.
And if all we have waiting for us is the fertilizer pit, if you lived a life dedicated to improving and being selfless and loving your neighbor and doing all those awesome things that Jesus says in the Bible, you haven't lost anything.
Well, I would say to Blaise,
right? Because if you would just have the fertilizer pit,
I would say to Blaise Pascal, you're not really providing evidence with that statement, but you are providing a very logical conclusion. This makes the most sense, and what you're saying, if this is not evidence, but if I was told that there's this place called hell and it exists and it's eternal, there's this potential possibility then that I could be wrong, and to think that if I'm wrong, I'm going to hell. But if I'm right, I'm going to the fertilizer pit. So Blaise, a great quote. It's been a very well-known quote from Blaise. Given the two options, if those are the only two, which logically makes the most sense? Yeah. Not really evidence, but in some ways a great critical thinking piece.
Well, I guess one thing that you could possibly look at, kind of in that vein, that might be considered evidence, is that if you go through cultures and you have different cultures throughout history, and then you take them together and you kind of compare them, at least in their belief systems, and the fact that there are certain levels of commonality between each thing, that's despite geographic location, that's despite cultural norms, and it's the belief systems that these these countries or these places have had over an extended period of time, that, you're looking that these things have believed and these things have been taught for hundreds or thousands of years. And then it's just like, well, hold on. How often is something like a paradise talked about, and that we are striving to be a paradise? It's like, either you're looking at that and you're looking at it and you see that in ancient times, people realized that their lives were so hard and that it was always better to look at something further into, like, okay, this is what we are striving for. This is, if we do these things here, if we can overcome the challenges that we are presented here, that we have something better coming for us. Well, that's one thing, but it's also, how much is there the potential? Because as we're going back, it's, at least in the Bible, it says that gazing upon nature reveals the magnificence of God. And it's like, yeah, there are so many cultures that look at the magnificence and, oh, that is what we are, going to worship and all this other stuff. There is something there that shows divinity.
So to nutshell it, we're back to order and design.
Yeah. Well, the magnificence of the world that we are in.
It's interesting because early on, I love the moral argument, and we talked about that earlier, objective morality. It's such an airtight argument, and it still can very well be the greatest piece of evidence in some regards. But now I'm kind of shifted now to, which you guys have actually both kind of pointed to indirectly. It is the fine-tuning argument, which is intelligent design. Just, I think why I love it more and more, I'm more fascinated about it, is because it is a very practical argument that seems to be a little bit more, when you bring it to its logical conclusion, yeah, you have to wrestle with origin and destiny. Yeah, you just look at how the world has been constructed in this universe, and just the tiniest little degree that the gravitational force is moved, this world's in utter chaos, one way or the other.
Yeah, like imagine if all our houses and every all just started floating 50,000 feet in the air. It'd be absolute chaos.
Yeah, there's
no gravity, right?
There's so many intangibles going on. Like, if we were even just a little bit closer to the sun, like we're fried.
We're a meatball.
We're done.
We're a one singed meatball.
Yeah, or if we're tiniest away from the sun, like we're like deep freeze.
That's some singed barbecue, yeah, or deep freeze, big ice cube.
So it's like there's so many crazy intangibles that are going on here. Even oxygen, just this exact 21% of the elements that's needed for humans to survive. There's so many things that need to be this precise, or we're not existing. It's hostile to life. We cease to exist. And so it definitely points, as you were saying earlier, not only is this design, it's got to be intelligent design. And I guess it can be so, that's on a super intellectual, technical level, but you can just go as simple as just saying, look, we could walk across a beach. We could see in the sand, Tom loves Sally, written in the sand. I think overwhelming, the natural response should not be, well, that just formed by the waves. It just made these lines and all connected to create just accident. And
the sand was having a creative afternoon.
Yeah.
wanted to make some letters.
I mean, and so that's what's so beautiful about this argument. The odds for it to just be by chance or accident, it is absolute insanity. It would be like, and this is not even the greatest example, but it's a beautiful example. I think Cliff Connectley brought it up lots of times. If the three of us are sitting around at a poker table and I'm the dealer and I deal myself, we play 20 games, 20 times in a row, I deal myself a royal flush. you're not going to come to the conclusion that, oh, just luck, that's just the way the cards went. No, you're going to reach for your gun. And if there's real money on the table, you're going to reach for your gun and I want my money back. Like no one thinks like that. Nobody says,
gotta keep that revolver ready.
Well, that was just an impressive accident of 20 royal flushes being dealt in a row. And that's even crazier odds than that analogy. And so I think the fine tuning, the design, it's becoming more and more attractive to me personally. But what would you guys say then on the flip side, the greatest evidence that God does not exist? If that same person, whether it be an atheist or agnostic, says to you, okay, what would convince you that God does not exist? What would be the greatest evidence for that? I mean, I think some people would naturally go to, well, if Jesus didn't actually exist, if he didn't die and not only just die, but rise from the grave, Paul even says that our faith is just worthless. It's
meaningless. we don't have, I mean, if we, talk about Jesus for a sec, we don't actually have any scientific proof that Jesus died on the cross and rose again. We have, we have written accounts, right?
Yeah,
but we don't have the tomb. We don't have the bloody shawl. We don't have the nails. We don't have physical evidence.
Mm-hmm. So what would convince you to actually just walk away from your faith? You know what? God doesn't exist.
That's a hard one.
The only time that usually something like that happens that I can recall is it usually has something to do with tragedy.
Yeah.
Because
let's say if my whole family got wiped out or something by somebody or some event, it would be hard to swallow.
But then we get something like Amazing Grace.
Or if the world, let's just say all of a sudden, or if the world did not have systems of governance and control, right? We live in a fallen world, but we have systems of governance and control to make sure that our society and our civilization do not just descend into absolute chaos, where it's just every man for himself. If the world imploded like that, and there was no, there was nothing happening after that. We're facing extinction event, and that's it. There is nothing happening after that. I don't know. That would be big evidence for me, I think.
Well, I think there is an argument that can be made that, you've called it the fallen world, and I think you can say that is an example of why people necessarily say that, well, there can't be an intelligent design, there can't be some huge thing. And it's just and I don't really like that argument, because it's well, if there is something, that is going on, that why does so much suffering have to be happening? Why does, why can't we live in a paradise? Well, it's just hold on. If we have intelligent design, this is an intelligence that is so, looking at this from a scientific standpoint, if from a scientist says, okay, there is some higher power, there is something that created this world, this is an intelligence that is so far beyond anything that we can even conceptualize. Because if there is intelligent design that has created the world, we can't even grasp how they would build the world. How that would even be something that could even be possible. The technology, you're basically talking about things that, can shape atoms at will into any different thing. It can create new different molecules. It can create different types of atoms to go in different locations. You're talking about something that is just mind-bogglingly huge. Like, because if there's an intelligence design, that means that there is something that literally created the air we're breathing, the wood, the trees that we're sitting on. You know, like, it's just, we can't even conceptualize that. So how can we put whatever situations like, oh, well, why does there have to be suffering? Why does there have to be grass? We can't answer why there has to be grass, so how can we even come to an understanding about why it would be made?
I think the suffering is probably the greatest evidence that God does not exist, and I think what a lot of skeptics and seekers do cling to that. But as you were saying, though, it's quite the dichotomy. In one way, it's a lot of people, it is the greatest evidence, but it actually is also evidence that actually points to the existence of God.
Well, it's basically because, like, if you actually, like, it's explained in Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
We are put on this world so that we can spend time with Christ through eternity. So this, to us, this is a testing ground. This is our probationary period. This is, oh, you think that you deserve this? Well, okay, sure, let's try it. I wanted company, but I want to make sure that the company I spend the rest of my, or a long time with, are people that I actually want to spend time with. And so I am going to put them through different situations. It's no different than an interview process for a job. Just, we get to live our entire lives going through this. And so it's just like, yeah, if it doesn't exist, okay, well then, you know, the whole world just is something, and my life doesn't mean anything, and really, why should I try and live a good life? But if living a good life, or living a life by the standards that are set out by the Bible, means that, you know, when life is going to be hard, that I can keep on living life. Oh, wait a minute. You mean we know that stuff's going to go wrong. We know we are going to face situations which are going to be very difficult. And yet this gives me a way of dealing with that. This gives me a reason as to why I would want to keep living after that. Oh, that might be something that is actually good to listen to, because everyone will agree the world is not an easy place to live.
Nathan, Tom, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Thanks. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to chat with you guys again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.